Hi there, Trax owners. Today in your 2020 Chevrolet Trax, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Curt's Class I 1¼ inch trailer hitch receiver. And this is what our hitch looks like when it's installed. The cross tube is going to be visible down below the bumper, but it's tucked back pretty nicely. So for the most part, you're really only going to notice the receiver here at the back. It uses a 1/2 inch hitch pin and clip. Now one doesn't come included with the hitch, but you can pick one up here at eTrailer.com. Located behind it, we have plate-style safety chain loops here at the bottom with a very large opening that should accommodate just about every shape, size, and style of safety chain. It features a 200-pound tongue weight, and thus the force going down on top of the receiver. That's going to be enough for a bike rack loaded up with 2, maybe 3 bikes. If they're extremely light bikes, you might even be able to get a 4-bike rack on there. It also features a 2,000-pound gross towing capacity, which is how much you can pull behind it. So if you have a very small trailer that you use just to haul some stuff, maybe haul some stuff to the dump, you could hook that up and get that job done. Now, as always, I recommend you verify in your vehicle's owner's manual and ensure you don't exceed any of its towing capacities. Now I've got some measurements for you to help you when deciding on accessories. From the center of the hitch pin hole to the edge of the rear bumper, it measures about 6½ inches. This is important when determining if any of your folding accessories can be placed in the upright storage position without contacting the bumper. And from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube, it measures about 11 inches. And this is important when determining if you need a drop, a rise, or a raise shank on any of your accessories. And since it is so low in this vehicle, I highly recommend a raise shank on your accessories. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's go over the installation together so you can have the confidence to do it at home. We'll begin our installation underneath the vehicle by lowering down our exhaust. We're on a lift, but you can do this at home. We're going to put a strap in place first before we take it down to ensure it doesn't drop down too low and cause any damage. We can then remove the exhaust hangers found on each side of our muffler. We're going to spray it with some spray lube to make the hangers easier to take off, and then you can use a pry bar to just pop that hanger off of there. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. You'll now want to verify which pieces of hardware we're going to be using for your Trax. Depending on your options and the location where it was manufactured, there are slight variations. Our hitch is going to mount onto the holes located here in the side of the frame, and you may or may not have weld nuts there. If you do not have weld nuts, you'll have to fish wire carriage bolts into those holes. If you do have weld nuts, you still have 2 different bolt options that could potentially work. If your weld nut is fine thread, you'll use the fine thread bolt, and if it's coarse thread, you use the coarse thread bolt. I recommend just trying by hand and seeing which one threads in there. And on our Trax here that we're working on, we're going to be using the coarse thread bolts to go into the factory weld nuts in the side of the frame. So now that we know which pieces of hardware we're going to use, we can go ahead and prepare this hardware. So we'll have 4 of these total. We're going to take each of these bolts then and place a conical tooth washer on them with the teeth facing away from the head of the bolt. If yours use carriage bolts, you won't be using these. Your carriage bolts don't use those because they have flange nuts. Now that we've determined which hardware we're going to use for our side bolts, we need to feed our hardware in for our lower bolts. There's one on each side that's going to come down through there, and that's going to use the carriage bolts no matter what. To get our carriage bolt in there, we're going to use the fish wire, feed it through, and then come out the larger hole just to the rear of that. Now, before you do this, I highly recommend you check your larger hole to make sure that your bolt is going to fit through there. You may have to pull this brake line down and just push it back just a little bit so you can see our bolt fits right in there. If you're having an issue getting your bolt in there, you may need to use a file and enlarge this hole. So we're going to push the coiled end into the hole, and then we're going to bring it back out through the large hole. We can then take our spacer. We're going to slide it over the coiled end and then thread our bolt onto the coiled end. We can then push these up into the frame. And then pull them down through. If you were using carriage bolts for your side bolts, you'll use this same access hole and feed those through the sides, and then we'll repeat this on the opposite side. Now on both sides, you are going to have to do some minor trimming. Our hitch is going to sit flush on the bottom of the frame, but our plastic here sticks down just a little bit, so we just need to trim this small section off so that way it sits flush. So we're just going to make a small cut with a pair of snips. And then just trim that section right out of there. And then we're going to do that on the other side as well. Now with the next set of hands, we'll lift our hitch into position. Make sure you feed your fish wires down through the holes in your hitch that line up with the corresponding hole in the vehicle. On our passenger side, we want to make sure we clear the exhaust. Go over top there. We'll bring our hitch up. We can remove our coiled wire and then thread on a flange nut onto the bottom. Once you've got one started on each side, the hitch will hold itself up, making it easier to install the rest of your hardware. And then we can thread in our side hardware. If you use carriage bolts, then when you were lifting your hitch up, you should have fed your coiled wires through. You just take those off and put flange nuts on. We'll put in our other bolt and repeat that process on the other side. And then we can go back and tighten down all of our hardware. When tightening your flange nuts, use an 18mm socket. And then for any bolts that you have installed, you're going to use a 19mm socket. We can then go back and torque all of our hardware to the specifications found in our instructions. Now with our hitch torqued down, if you popped your brake lines out of the brackets to get your hardware fed in, you can click those back in, and then we can lift our exhaust back up now and put that back. Spray lubricant will make it a little bit easier when reinstalling it. So just spray a little on the hole, lift up on the exhaust, and then it should just push right back into place. We're going to do that on the other side. We can then remove our strap. And we're now ready to install our favorite accessory in our hitch and hit the road. And that completes our installation of Curt's Class I 1¼ inch trailer hitch receiver on our 2020 Chevrolet Trax.